So in today's video, we're looking at what you need in order to start soaping if you're a beginner and you've never soaped before, and how much that's going to cost. So we're going to run through some of the equipment that you need, some of the things that you need to bear in mind as far as what is a good product to use and what you shouldn't use as far as soap making goes, and the sorts of things that I prefer and what. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need, which I think is the most important thing that you need to think about, and it's probably going to cost you a little bit of money, is you need a container in order to make your lye. So lye is sodium hydroxide, which is a solution of distilled water and sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide is a base. And a base is essentially similar to an acid. It will be quite corrosive. It can cause harm to skin, eyes, and stuff like that. So you really need to be looking at storing this correctly and making it. For your lye container, you want something that is resistant to lye, and that carries a number 5 recycling code, which is polypropylene, or a number 2 recycling code, which is HDPE, or high density polyethylene. Either of those are great for using for lye. My preference is for this. Now, this is a polypropylene. So you can see on the bottom there, if I put it on camera a wee bit, you should see on the bottom, do it there. It's got a PP on the bottom. Now that PP is quite important. So that's polypropylene, recycling code number 5. And it's also got a screw lid. Now that for me is really important. I'll often make my lye up in advance, fill out to cool. What I can do is make it up in this jug, screw the top on, and then I give it like a half a screw back. The lid is still on, so if it were to fall over, I wouldn't spill lye everywhere. It also means that if I need to keep it longer than, say, the time it takes to cool down, and I need to keep it overnight or a couple of days, I can do in this. And with a sealed top, it means that my high sodium hydroxide solution is not actually going to draw any more water into it and therefore become the wrong water content and add more water to a recipe where I don't want additional water. So that's my first thing, is to get one of those. These probably retail around about £6 or £7 each, so they're a little bit pricey. And if you're just starting out, you don't need one of these. You can use a jug to start with, but I would suggest that you look at it and make sure that it is either a PP or a HDPE. Talking of jugs, jugs are the next thing you're going to need, and I tend to go for these. These are 1 litre containers. I tend to get mine from supermarkets within the UK. Now in the UK, places like Morrison's and Sainsbury's and even Tesco's will do these sorts of jugs for £1 each. They're actually quite affordable, and really, if you're starting out, you want a couple of them, 2 or 3, just to give you enough space to be able to maybe use colorants and stuff in them. But if you just wanted to make soap and see if you like it, 1 would be enough. The next thing you're going to need are spatulas, and it's going to be things like these. Now, these were from Amazon. You can get them in packs of 2, 4, 6. The cheapest ones I could find were around about £4. But you could look in charity shops, you could look in thrift stores, you can do all those places for these. If you're just starting out, you can use them. You can also use things like stainless steel spoons, wooden spoons, plastic spoons. The one thing you must avoid, though, is aluminium. Aluminium and lye will actually create hydrogen gas, which is explosive, shouldn't be breathed in, and is really not good for you. So do not use anything aluminium when working with soap. Next, you're going to need one of these. Now, this is my stick blender. Slots together, and it gives you this stick blender, which is one of those. Now, the thing with stick blenders is you can pay as much or as little for them as you want. This particular one you can't get anymore, and it's my absolute favorite. It cost me about £15 or £16 on Amazon, but you can get these as cheap as kind of like £10. And even those £10 ones will do enough for you if you just want to get started. The other thing is you can use a whisk, but if you're using a whisk, it's going to take you potentially hours to bring a mix together. So it's worth using one of these, or you may have one in it's chucked in a cupboard. But again, you can pick these up relatively cheaply on places like eBay or even from a charity shop. So look out for those in charity shops and places like that if you want one of those. You're going to need personal protective equipment, and this is really, really important. So you're going to need things like this, see on the screen now. So of all of them, the most important are going to be your goggles. Okay, Now, these are just a very, very cheap pair of goggles. They cost, I don't know, I think they were £2 or £3 for a pack of two. They're really important because you have a base that you're using. You could potentially ruin your eyesight if you get light into your eyes. So, of everything you're going to wear, goggles are the most important. Okay. Now, you are going to need things like gloves. Now, these are latex gloves. I prefer them to big rubber gloves because I like to do a lot of fiddly things with my soaps, and these give me a little bit more dexterity. However, you can use rubber gloves that cost £2 or £3 as a kind of means to get around having to buy a big box of these. But a box of these is only £6 and they are useful throughout the house. I wouldn't worry too much about that. And long sleeve. Now you can see that I tend to roll my sleeves up, and I am guilty of not wearing long sleeves purely because if I roll sleeves down, I don't like anything here. I get very kind of clumsy with sleeves and I knock things over. I'm more likely to knock things over having sleeves on. However, you can get these wonderful things, which are basically arms, which you then put on thusly. It covers the bottom of your arm. I can't knock anything over with it. And because of the little thumb hole, when I put a glove on, it just keeps everything kind of in place. And if you're a man, or if you're anyone that kind of gets a little bit sweaty wearing these things, and let's face it, a lot of us do, I actually find that in the summertime, these absorb a lot of the sweat that your hands might create in the gloves, and therefore it's not dripping out, which I know sounds gross, but it's one of those things that you have to take account of, that you don't want sweat dripping into somebody's soap that's going to be buying it. So this just prevents all of that. And I also wear a hat a lot of the time. I have very, very close cropped hair, and I actually shave it sometimes because, like most men, I'm going bald. However, I do wear a hat to save any hairs going in, and my moustache is so well waxed, it's unlikely that any of that's going to go in there. But occasionally I will wear a beard mask if I'm doing particularly large. So these are the things you need to have as far as kind of personal protective gear is concerned. Now, soaping is chemistry, and like all chemistry, you need to make sure that you're measuring certain things in order to do it. And one of the things that you do need, one of these, this is a temperature thermometer. Okay, it's an infrared thermometer, and it's really useful for getting the temperature of things. Just making sure that you're soaping at the right temperature. Soap too hot, things are going to get speed up quickly, and you're going to be able to work with it. If you're soaping too slow, and you've got things like palm oil in there, you may get false. So a thermometer like this is really important. Now, these are quite expensive. They retail at around about £20 for a decent one. However, you can use a probe thermometer as well. And I'll leave links to all of these things in the description box below, so you can go and kind of see how much they are. And you can use that probe thermometer, but a thermometer is really important, particularly when you are starting out. One of the other things that you really need to have is a scale, and these are perfectly reasonable. You don't have to go out and spend a lot of money on them. These will retail somewhere around about £10. And as long as they are accurate and they don't give odd readings, and I tend to use a little calibration device like this. All this has got is some perfectly weighted little weights in there, and those weights relate to certain amounts. And what I will do is I will just pop those onto the scales and make sure that my scales are calibrated within a degree of something that I'm happy with. However, if you want to go and sell your soaps, you must remember that you need an actual calibrated scale, which I do have. If I'm going to do soaps that I then intend to sell, but for just doing bits and pieces, stuff, getting started, one of these scales is perfect. You then need something to put your soap in once you've made the batter. Now, we have all sorts of molds that we have access to. You can have kind of these pink ones that are available on Amazon. They're relatively cheap, but they are quite floppy. They do bow out on the sides here. So you do need to be a little bit careful about these ones, and you do need to put them on a tray. You then get molds like this, which again are on Amazon. These are small ones that I use for nice landscape soaps, and they're about £10–15 a pop. You may have seen these ones, which are the Amazon ones, which slide into a little wooden pot, which is this pot here, or a wooden box even, like that one. And these are liners that you can make a loaf of soap, and they're quite big, and they do make quite a number of soaps. So if you're just starting out, I suggest to get something smaller. But if you're just starting and you want to give it a go, any box you might have, cardboard box, anything like that, you can actually line them like this one with some freezer paper or even some baking parchment. If it's your first time giving it a go and you just want to see what it's like, this is a perfectly reasonable way of making a mold to fill with soap that will release perfectly well. So how much did all of this cost? Well, how long is a piece of string? It depends on how much you want to spend. If you go onto places like Amazon, you look for deals and things like that, most of this equipment you can pick up for between, say, 40 and 60 pounds in the UK. A lot of stuff you may well have already. So you might have spatulas that you no longer use, wooden spoons, you may have a stick blender that's just lying around in the cupboard somewhere that you don't use. So a lot of these things you will have. What you do need to spend the money on is eye protection, arm and leg protection, but you can wear a jumper and things like that. Make sure you're wearing gloves. A stick blender is always handy, and a thermometer and a decent scales. But most of those you can pick up quite cheaply. You can get started in soaping relatively cheap. So that's basically the equipment that you'll need in order to start soap making as a beginner without any knowledge. In the next few videos, we'll look at the oils that you'll need, the additional ingredients like sodium hydroxide and additives you can put into soap. And I'll also have a recipe with a how-to in order to make your first soap. So until next time, soapsters, have a good one.